In southeastern Turkey, AI has just finished analyzing the largest archaeological dataset ever assembled from the world's oldest temple complex. Using three-dimensional laser scanning, ground-penetrating radar, and neural network pattern recognition deployed simultaneously across 12 interconnected prehistoric sites spanning 150 kilometers of rugged Anatolian terrain, researchers have finally pieced together something archaeologists have debated for 3 decades. Who actually built Göbekli Tepe? The answer the AI produced did not match any existing theory. The builders were not primitive hunter-gatherers stumbling into monumentality for the first time. They were members of a sophisticated regional civilization, a connected network of communities with specialized labor, standardized symbolic communication systems, advanced geometric knowledge, and engineering capabilities that appeared fully formed from the very beginning, with no evidence of a learning curve. A civilization that thrived for at least 800 years across southeastern Anatolia, coordinating massive construction projects, training specialist stonemasons, and maintaining a shared symbolic language across communities separated by days of travel. And then, right when agriculture should have propelled them forward, right when everything we know about human development says they should have been entering a golden age, they deliberately buried their greatest achievements under thousands of tons of earth and vanished from the archaeological record as if they had never existed. What the AI found in those scans explains exactly why. And the truth is far more disturbing than anyone imagined. For 30 years, one question has haunted archaeology more than any other. How did people who supposedly had no metal tools, no wheels, no written language, and who had not even invented farming yet, manage to carve, transport, and erect T-shaped limestone pillars weighing up to 50 tons with mathematical precision that challenges modern stonemasons using modern equipment? The site sits on a hilltop near the city of Şanlıurfa in southeastern Turkey. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating in 1995, he uncovered something that fundamentally should not exist: a massive temple complex built around 9,600 BCE, 11,600 years ago. To put that number in perspective, Stonehenge was built around 3000 BCE. The Egyptian pyramids date to roughly 2500 BCE. Göbekli Tepe predates them both by more than 6,000 years. It was constructed before pottery, before the wheel, before metalworking, and before agriculture itself. According to every model of human development we had, this was flatly impossible. The site consists of at least 20 circular enclosures, each featuring massive T-shaped pillars standing up to 18 feet tall and weighing between 10 and 50 tons each. These are not crude stone slabs. They are precisely carved monoliths decorated with intricate bas-relief carvings of lions, foxes, scorpions, vultures, and snakes. Some feature undercut relief, where stone is carved away behind and beneath the figure, one of the most technically demanding forms of sculpture. One wrong strike and the entire relief shatters. Modern carvers approach this with steel chisels and power tools, working slowly, constantly checking for stress fractures. Yet at Göbekli Tepe, using only stone tools, the builders created undercut reliefs with depths of 7 to 8 centimeters behind delicate elements like animal legs and vulture wings that remain intact 12,000 years later. Some pillars have arms carved into their sides with hands meeting at the front, suggesting they represent stylized human figures wearing carved belts and garments. The detail is extraordinary. The precision is impossible to explain. The official explanation was straightforward. Nomadic hunter-gatherers, driven by religious fervor, came together periodically to build this temple using stone tools. They carved the pillars from bedrock, transported them uphill, erected them, and then, around 8000 BCE, deliberately buried the entire complex, preserving it perfectly for modern discovery. Schmidt called it the world's first temple, the birthplace of organized religion. For decades, that interpretation dominated archaeological thinking, but it left the most critical question completely unanswered. Who were these people? Where did they come from? Where did they learn techniques that should not exist for thousands more years? And why does every piece of evidence suggest they already knew exactly what they were doing from the very first stone they ever carved? That is what the AI was designed to answer, and what it revealed has fundamentally rewritten our understanding of how human civilization began. The breakthrough came from the Tas Tepeler Project, Turkey's most ambitious archaeological initiative ever launched. Beginning in 2020, the project unified research across 12 major Neolithic sites scattered throughout the Sanliurfa region under a single coordinated research vision. 219 scientists from 36 academic institutions, including 21 international partners, deployed every advanced analytical tool available to modern science. Three-dimensional laser mapping captured surface details down to fractions of a millimeter. Ground-penetrating radar revealed structures hidden beneath meters of accumulated earth. AI-powered pattern recognition software was trained to detect relationships completely invisible to human observers. Isotopic analysis traced where specific individuals lived during different periods of their childhood by examining chemical signatures locked in their tooth enamel. Forensic spectroscopy identified organic compounds in sediment samples thousands of years old. For the first time in the history of archaeology, researchers were not studying Göbekli Tepe as an isolated monument. They were mapping an entire civilization, and the picture that emerged was staggering. Göbekli Tepe was not a lone temple built by wandering bands of hunter-gatherers who happened to converge on a hilltop for spiritual purposes. It was the ceremonial hub of a vast, interconnected regional network that nobody had imagined existed. Karahan Tepe, just 11 kilometers to the southeast, contains more than 250 T-shaped pillars of its own, many still standing in their original positions. It was occupied continuously for approximately 1,500 years, from roughly 9,400 to 8,000 BCE. Sayburç, Sefer Tepe, Harbet Suvan, Kakmak Tepe, Ayanlar, Hoyuk, and at least 6 other major sites all feature the same architectural elements, the same symbolic carvings, the same construction methods, the same T-shaped pillar forms, all dating to roughly the same era, all presenting the same impossible technical mysteries. This was not coincidence. This was coordination. When the AI analyzed the complete corpus of carved symbols across all 12 sites, it found something that changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric communication. Approximately 20 core pictographs appear consistently at every site across the entire network. These are not crude scratches or random decorative choices. They are standardized symbols carved the same way, positioned in similar contexts, and repeated across hundreds of pillars spanning centuries of construction. This is what linguists call a semasiographic system, symbols that convey meaning without encoding spoken language. Not quite writing as we understand it, but absolutely not random art. A deliberate communication system created by people who supposedly had no literacy, no agriculture, and no permanent cities. Yet here they were, transmitting complex information through agreed-upon visual symbols across a network of communities spanning thousands of square kilometers. The AI frequency analysis revealed something even more specific. Certain animals dominate specific enclosures at Göbekli Tepe. Enclosure A is overwhelmed with snake carvings, dozens of them woven into elaborate net-like patterns that cover entire pillar surfaces. Enclosure B belongs to the foxes. Both massive central pillars feature large fox reliefs measuring over 1 meter tall. Enclosure C shows predominantly boars with snakes almost completely absent. Enclosure D, the largest and oldest structure discovered so far, displays the broadest variety of creatures, including vultures, scorpions, lions, cranes, spiders, and the most complex symbolic compositions found anywhere at the site. The AI statistical analysis confirmed what this distribution means. Each enclosure represents a different group identity, different clans, different kinship bands, each identified by their emblematic animal. When communities gathered at Göbekli Tepe from across the region, they went to their enclosure. The fox people met in enclosure B. The boar people met in enclosure C. The snake people met in enclosure A. This is totemism, one of humanity's oldest known forms of social organization, preserved in stone with mathematical precision. But here is where the AI detected something far more sophisticated hiding in the data. The neural networks identified what linguists call co-occurrence patterns, systematic relationships in how symbols appear together across the entire network. Specific symbols pair together far more frequently than random distribution would predict. The snake and the H symbol cluster together 68% of the time on pillars where both appear. The fox and certain geometric patterns show similar correlation rates. The scorpion almost never appears without at least one bird carved nearby. Snakes appear in groups of 3, 6, 9, or 12, never in odd numbers. These are not random compositional choices by individual artists. These are rules. This is syntax, the beginning of grammar. Different carvers working at different sites, potentially separated by decades or even centuries of time, all following the same conventions about which symbols belong together and in what combinations. And here is what makes this coordination even more remarkable. When the AI compared the exact physical dimensions of symbols across different sites, the consistency was extraordinary. Fox carvings at Göbekli Tepe average 113 centimeters tall. At Karahan Tepe, fox carvings average 109 centimeters. At Sayburç, 115 centimeters. The variation across the entire network is less than 6%. The H symbols show even tighter standardization. The A, I measured the proportions of over 200 H symbols across 8 different sites. The ratio of the vertical bar to the horizontal bar varies by less than 4% across the entire sample. That is not approximate copying by people who vaguely remembered what a symbol should look like. That is following standardized specifications. Someone was teaching specific proportions. Someone was checking the work. Someone was maintaining quality control across communities separated by days of difficult travel through mountainous terrain. And they maintained this consistency for at least 800 years. This consistency lasted from 9,600 BCE to approximately 8,200 BCE. That is longer than the entire history of European colonization of the Americas. Longer than Islam has existed. Think about the organizational infrastructure required to maintain symbolic consistency across that span of time and distance. A regional communication network operating across southeastern Turkey 11,500 years ago. Communities that may have spoken different languages, all using agreed-upon symbols with standardized dimensions to share information and maintain shared identity across dozens of generations. This was not a scattering of primitive camps. This was a coordinated civilization with institutions, training systems, and knowledge transmission methods we can barely imagine. But here is where the AI analysis gets deeply disturbing. When neural networks examine the technical quality of construction across the site's different occupation layers, attempting to map how skills developed over time, they found a pattern that contradicts everything we expect about how civilizations evolve. The earliest layers at Göbekli Tepe, dating to roughly 9,600 BCE, feature the largest pillars, the most precisely carved reliefs, the deepest undercut sculptures, and the most complex symbolic compositions found anywhere at the site. Layer 2, built 500 to 800 years later, shows smaller pillars, shallower carving, simpler compositions, and reduced technical ambition. By the final occupation phase, the work is comparatively crude. Simple imitations of earlier designs carved by people who clearly could not match the skill of their predecessors. The quality degrades over time. This is the exact opposite of what happens at every other ancient construction site we have ever studied. The Egyptians built increasingly sophisticated pyramids as their techniques improved over centuries. The Greeks refined their architecture with each generation. Roman engineering grew more ambitious decade by decade. But at Göbekli Tepe, the best work came first. Everything after was decline. The AI quantified this degradation with mathematical precision. In the earliest construction phase, symbol pairing follows the predicted co-occurrence rules 92% of the time. In the middle phase, that drops to 73%. By the final occupation period, it falls to 58%, barely better than random chance. Within 800 years, people went from rigidly following complex symbolic conventions to barely remembering they existed. The stonework tells the same story. Analysis of 350 quarry sites within 2 kilometers of the main complex revealed 3 distinct carving techniques. The earliest quarries show evidence of thermal shock fracturing, where builders heated specific areas of limestone to between 400 and 600 degrees Celsius, then applied cold water rapidly. The thermal shock caused fractures along predetermined lines with extraordinary control, allowing for precise separation of stone from bedrock. This technique requires intimate knowledge of the material's internal structure, how the crystalline layers are oriented where natural faults lie, and how different mineral densities respond to rapid temperature changes. Modern stonemasons can do this because they have geological surveys, decades of accumulated experience, and the ability to test techniques on sample stones. The builders of Göbekli Tepe achieved the same results without any of that. And here is what makes it truly inexplicable. Later quarries show only crude pecking with hammerstones. The thermal shock technique vanishes completely from the archaeological record within a few centuries of its first appearance at the site. The sophisticated method came first and then disappeared. There are no practice pillars anywhere in the quarry fields, no failed attempts, no cracked stones abandoned halfway through extraction because someone made a mistake, no evidence whatsoever of a learning curve. The skills appear fully formed at the very beginning, execute flawlessly for a period, and then slowly fade away as if the knowledge was draining out of the culture generation by generation. This is not the pattern of people inventing new techniques. This is the pattern of people inheriting knowledge they did not create, maintaining it as long as they could, and then losing it. The 2025 excavation season delivered discoveries that deepen this mystery further. At Karahan Tepe, archaeologists uncovered something unprecedented in the entire Tas Tepeler network, a T-shaped pillar carved with a three-dimensional human face. In 30 years of excavation across all 12 sites, every single T-pillar had been faceless. Arms, hands, belts, garments, all present and detailed, but never a face. This discovery shattered that pattern. The pillar stands 135 centimeters tall, featuring a prominent nose, deep-set eyes, and a sharp, angular jawline. It dates to the beginning of the 9th millennium BCE. Archaeology magazine named it one of the top 10 archaeological discoveries of 2025 and put Karahan Tepe on its cover. But what made the AI flag this finding as especially significant was its context. The pillar was not found in a grand ceremonial enclosure. It stood in a structure containing domestic elements, grinding stones for processing grain, flint tools for cutting, evidence of daily habitation. The builders of these monuments were not just visiting for occasional ceremonies. They were living at these sites, working there. And the faces they carved were not abstract deities or spirit beings. They were representations of real people within their communities. At Göbekli Tepe itself, a human statue was found deliberately embedded horizontally in the wall base of Enclosure D during the 2025 excavation season. Not buried accidentally by later activity, placed intentionally during original construction as a foundation offering, designed to remain hidden forever within the sacred architecture itself. At Sayburç, excavators uncovered a sculpture depicting a deceased person with a sealed or stitched mouth, the kind of mortuary preparation associated with ritual display of the dead. At Sefer Tepe, 2 more carved human faces appeared on shaped stone blocks, executed in artistic styles completely distinct from anything found at Göbekli Tepe or Karahan Tepe, and a dual-faced bead carved from black serpentine stone was recovered, featuring 2 expressive human faces on opposing sides, pierced through the center for wearing as jewelry. Each site in the network had developed its own artistic voice, its own distinctive style, but they all spoke the same symbolic language, like different dialects of a shared tongue, different local traditions flowing from the same deep cultural source. And here is where the forensic evidence transforms the entire picture of what these sites were actually used for. Among 691 bone fragments recovered from Göbekli Tepe over decades of excavation, researchers identified 3 adult skulls that had been intentionally modified after death in ways never before documented at any Neolithic site anywhere in the world. Deep grooves were carved into the bone, running from the forehead over the crown to the back of the skull. These were not shallow scratches. They were deep channels carved with stone tools while the bone was still fresh, before it had dried and hardened after death. One skull, designated Skull 1, had a precisely drilled hole in the left side, 6.7 millimeters across at the surface, tapering to 5 millimeters where it penetrates through the bone. It was positioned with extraordinary care so that when a cord was threaded through it, the skull would hang perfectly vertical, facing forward. This was not random damage. This was engineering. Engineering for permanent display. 59% of all human bone fragments found at the site are cranial material. In a normal burial context, cranial material represents about 15% of remains. At Göbekli Tepe, it is nearly 60%. This is deliberate selection. They were keeping the skulls and discarding the rest of the skeleton. Not a single complete human burial has ever been found at the site. No intact skeletons, no grave goods laid alongside the dead. Only fragments, only pieces. Skulls that were carved, drilled, polished, and prepared for display. Bodies that were systematically disarticulated and stripped of flesh. Cut marks at precisely the muscle attachment points tell forensic anthropologists exactly what was done. Defleshing, the methodical removal of all soft tissue from bone. The AI chemical mapping of sediment cores revealed seasonal patterns in organic residue consistent with decomposed human tissue. Higher concentrations occur in layers corresponding to late autumn and early winter, with lower concentrations in spring and summer. The processing of bodies happened on a schedule, specific times of year when communities gathered from across the region, bringing their dead to be transformed. The pattern repeats through multiple stratigraphic layers spanning centuries, generation after generation following the same calendar. Vultures, whose remains dominate the faunal assemblage at the site, stripped the flesh. Specialist practitioners then carved, drilled, and polished the skulls. The AI estimated that between 5,000 and 15,000 individuals were processed across the network's active period. This was not occasional ritual. This was systematic, sustained, large-scale transformation of the dead into sacred objects. And it was this shared practice, this cult of death and ancestor veneration, that held the entire civilization together across 150 kilometers and 800 years. Not a shared king, not a common army, a shared relationship with mortality itself. The living built the temples. The dead gave them meaning. But here is where the timeline becomes truly terrifying. Around 8000 BCE, the entire system collapsed. Every single site in the Tas Tepeler network was deliberately buried, not destroyed, not abandoned to the slow erosion of weather and time. Buried. Carefully, methodically, almost protectively. Thousands of tons of earth placed in deliberate layers, each one designed to shield and preserve what lay beneath. The enclosures, the carved pillars, the symbolic compositions, all of it sealed underground with such precision that the structure survived virtually intact for 12,000 years. Whoever performed this burial understood exactly what they were doing. They were not closing a temple. They were creating a time capsule, and the timing makes it even more disturbing. The burial happened at the exact moment when agriculture was becoming fully established across the region. The exact moment when, according to every model of civilization we possess, these communities should have been flourishing. More reliable food means larger populations. Larger populations mean more specialized workers. More specialists mean better construction, more elaborate art, greater engineering ambitions. That is how it works. Everywhere. Always. In Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in the Indus Valley, in China. The agricultural revolution accelerates civilizational development. Except here. At the precise moment when agriculture should have launched Göbekli Tepe into an era of unprecedented achievement, they buried everything and walked away. Why? The DNA evidence provides the most compelling answer we have, and it changes everything we thought about what happened to these people. Ancient genomes extracted from the nearby site of Kayonu, located approximately 300 kilometers to the east, were analyzed under the European Union-funded NeoGene project. Researchers obtained DNA from 14 individuals buried in Neolithic structures dating to around 8,500 BCE, making it the largest ancient DNA sampling group ever assembled for Upper Mesopotamia. What they discovered rewrites the final chapter of Göbekli Tepe completely. The populations of Upper Mesopotamia, the people who lived in the same region where Göbekli Tepe and its sister site stand, were not an isolated group that died out when their monuments were buried. They were the direct genetic ancestors of the Anatolian Neolithic farmers who migrated into Europe beginning around 7,000 years ago. Those farmers carried agriculture, domesticated animals, pottery, and all the accumulated knowledge of their Anatolian homeland across the Bosporus and into the Balkans, then gradually spread across the entire European continent over the following millennia. Every modern European carries genetic fragments that trace back to those Anatolian migrants, which means every modern European carries genetic heritage connected to the same Upper Mesopotamian population that built Göbekli Tepe. The builders did not go extinct. They did not vanish into some mysterious catastrophe. They transformed. They became farmers. They spread across an entire continent, and in that spreading, they dissolved. The concentrated expertise that had been held by specialized practitioners at 12 sacred sites was diluted across thousands of farming villages scattered from Anatolia to the British Isles. The stonemasons who knew thermal shock fracturing became farmers who occasionally shaped fieldstones. The ritual specialists who processed skulls became village elders who remembered fragments of old traditions. The astronomical observers who tracked precession cycles became storytellers who passed down garbled memories of celestial knowledge. Within a few generations, no one could replicate the thermal shock quarrying. Within a few more, no one remembered the symbolic pairing rules. The geometric knowledge scattered into folk memory. The sophisticated death rituals simplified into basic burial practices. The builders of Göbekli Tepe vanished the way a river vanishes when it reaches the ocean. Not through destruction, but through dilution. Not through catastrophe, but through success. Agriculture made them abundant, but abundance made their specialized roles obsolete. And when the last generation of specialists saw what was happening, when they watched the carving get cruder and the rules get forgotten and the sophisticated techniques slip away year by year, they made one final decision. They would bury their greatest achievements under mountains of earth, protect the carved pillars and symbolic compositions from weathering and destruction, and trust that someday a future civilization would have the technology to excavate them, scan them, and understand the message carved into those stones by the last people who still knew what it meant. And the AI analysis of Pillar 43, the most complex carved composition at the entire site, hints at what that message might contain. The pillar's western face holds 47 distinct figures arranged in structured horizontal registers, stacked vertically like sentences on a page. The three handbag symbols at the top are evenly spaced. The V symbol friezes are aligned with precision that varies by less than 2 millimeters across a width of 90 centimeters. The central vulture is positioned at the exact geometric midpoint of the entire composition, both horizontally and vertically. Someone planned this layout before a single chisel stroke was made. Someone knew exactly where every element would go. This is not spontaneous artistic expression. This is information organized according to a template, a format designed to be read by people who understood the structure, a message that was carefully planned and executed with the precision of a technical document. Martin Sweatman of the University of Edinburgh fed high-resolution images of this pillar into astronomical simulation software. The AI compared the positions and orientations of the carved animals to the positions of constellations throughout history, accounting for the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts how the night sky appears over millennia. The vulture aligned with what we now call Sagittarius. The scorpion matched the constellation Scorpius. When the software reconstructed the night sky for the exact stellar positions indicated by the carvings, it landed on a date approximately 12,800 years ago. That date corresponds almost exactly to the beginning of the Younger Dryas impact event, a period when geological evidence suggests fragments of a comet struck Earth. The impact triggered catastrophic climate change that lasted over 1,000 years. Massive floods, sudden temperature drops, the extinction of dozens of species, the collapse of human populations across multiple continents. Now, the German Archaeological Institute, which oversees the official excavation, published a detailed rebuttal of this interpretation. They point out that radiocarbon dates for Enclosure D are at least 1,400 years younger than Sweatman's proposed astronomical date. They argue that constellations are cultural constructs and that Neolithic hunter-gatherers would not have grouped stars the same way as ancient Greek astronomers. One critic demonstrated you could find similar constellation matches in the illustrations of children's books. These are serious objections from serious scientists who work at the actual site, and they deserve genuine consideration. But here is what even the skeptics cannot dismiss. Whether or not the specific astronomical interpretation is correct, the symbols are standardized across 12 sites spanning 150 kilometers. They follow measurable rules. They show mathematical precision. and the V-shaped symbols on Pillar 43 display patterns that correspond to a 365-day solar calendar with 11 epigomenal days added to align with the actual solar year. That is sophisticated astronomical knowledge that mainstream archaeology says should not exist for another 7,000 years, until ancient Egypt developed similar calendar systems. Yet here it is, carved into limestone at the dawn of the Neolithic, created by people who supposedly could not count past 10. Whether these symbols record a catastrophic cosmic event, or encode astronomical observations for agricultural timing, or preserve cosmological mythology that we cannot yet fully decode, one thing is clear from the AI analysis. The builders of Göbekli Tepe knew their civilization was dying. They could measure the decline. The symbol rules degraded from 92% adherence to 58%. The thermal shock technique vanished from the quarries. The pillar sizes shrank. The carving depth decreased. They watched it happen over centuries, and they could not stop it. So they did the only thing left to them. They preserved what they could in the most permanent form available. They carved their most important knowledge into stone. They standardized their symbols across 12 sites because redundancy protects against loss. They created a system designed to survive even if no living person remembered what it meant. And when they could no longer maintain what they had built, they sealed it all underground and trusted the future. That future is now. We have returned to the hilltop 12,000 years later with three-dimensional scanners, neural networks, DNA sequencers, ground-penetrating radar, and forensic chemistry. We have mapped the regional network, we have decoded the symbolic grammar, we have traced the genetic line forward through 12 millennia to the present day. We have done exactly what they hoped someone would do, but we have barely started. 90% of Göbekli Tepe remains underground. At least 20 more circular enclosures are confirmed by radar surveys. Potentially 200 additional carved pillars lie buried beneath meters of protective fill. Ground-penetrating radar has detected engineered voids beneath the main structures, hollow spaces with walls too straight to be natural, chambers that were deliberately excavated into bedrock and then sealed over. The AI has mapped their dimensions. It has flagged anomalies in the sediment layers, but no human being has entered those chambers since they were closed 12,000 years ago. Nobody knows what is inside. The Tas Tepeler Project continues to expand. 12 active excavation sites, 219 researchers, international exhibitions drawing millions of visitors. The Turkish government has invested over $150 million annually in archaeological work, calling this a golden age of discovery. And every season brings new revelations that make the story bigger, stranger, and more impossible to dismiss. The builders of Göbekli Tepe are not a lost civilization in the romantic sense. They are not aliens or mythological Atlanteans or interdimensional travelers. They are something far more profound and far more unsettling than any of those fantasies. They are our direct ancestors. Their genes flow through the veins of every European alive today. Their cultural legacy seeded the agricultural revolution that created the modern world. And what they preserved in stone, what they buried so carefully, what they standardized across 12 sites and maintained for 800 years was never meant for them. It was meant for their descendants. It was meant for whoever would come next with the capability to find it, excavate it, scan it, and decode it. That means it was meant for us. The question now is whether we have the will to finish what they started, whether we will excavate the remaining 90%, whether we will open those sealed underground chambers, whether we will decode every symbol, map every alignment, and understand the complete message that the oldest known civilization on Earth considered so critically important that they spent centuries carving it into stone and then buried it under a mountain to protect it from the passage of time. The stones are still there on that hilltop in Turkey. The pillars are still carved with foxes and vultures and scorpions and faceless human figures. The sealed chambers wait beneath enclosures that have not been disturbed in 12,000 years. The symbols still follow their ancient rules, their standardized proportions, and their mysterious co-occurrence patterns. And the AI continues running, continues detecting new connections, continues finding evidence that these were not primitive people grasping in the dark. They were a sophisticated civilization that understood more than we thought possible, built more than we can fully explain, and then when the world changed around them and their knowledge began to fade, made the most remarkable decision in the history of our species. They chose to bury the truth and trust the future to find it. Their descendants have found it. We are reading it. We are decoding it symbol by symbol, pattern by pattern, pillar by pillar. But we are only at the beginning. What do you think they were trying to tell us? If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like this one.